Okay, we are in actually 6. I think some people. I don't know who's watching it. But doesn't matter. They are somebody's watching it, yeah. But okay. We are, where's my notes? I've got us in about 27. That sound right?
Yeah, 27.
Okay, he's in the we'll talk about this because of chapter 7, but the element of the social caste system is just profound in the Gospels. It's pervasive. It's so pervasive. You don't even see it. It's everywhere. And so you see that, and that's why these reversals that he's talking about are so important, right? Blessed are you who weep, for you shall laugh. And the weeper would be, of course, the poor person, the person on the lower end of the social strata, and the person laughing is the person at the upper end, and often he's laughing at the person who is weeping. And so that's the dynamic behind. He's not being vindictive. That's the dynamic behind. It's that social caste system. That's the dynamic behind it. And so he's going to continue that in 27, and then lay down a sort of kingdom principle, which also overturns so much of the social caste system, and starting in verse 37. So let's just go ahead and read it, and then we can talk about it. 27 through 36.
But I say to you who hear, love your enemies, do good to those who hate you. Bless those who curse you, pray for those who abuse you. To one who strikes you on the cheek, offer the other also. And from one who takes away your cloak, do not withhold your tunic either. Give to everyone who begs from you, and from the one who takes your goods, do not demand them back. And as you wish that others would do to you, do so to them. If you love those who love you, what benefit is that to you? For even sinners love those who love them. And if you do good to those who do good to you, what benefit is that to you? For even sinners do the same. And if you lend to those from whom you expect to receive, what credit is that to you? Even sinners lend to sinners and get back the same amount. But love your enemies, and do good, and lend, expecting nothing in return, and your reward will be great, and you will be sons of the Most High. For he is kind to the ungrateful and the evil. Be merciful, even as your Father is merciful.
Okay, so in verse 34, is that the one?
Lend and
Yeah, they lend expecting nothing. Where did I just see that? Is it 34?
it's 34.
Yeah.
You lend from those whom you expect to receive, and what credit is that to you? Even sinners
I'm
lend
sorry,
to
35. Lend expecting nothing in return. So in that culture, you'll see it with the centurion. There's just this suffocating social web of obligation. And so Jesus is going to sit down with a Pharisee at a Pharisee's house for dinner. He's going to be the guest of honor. And he's not just being nice. Because of the way things worked back then, the social obligation thing, that Pharisee then expects that Jesus would do the same thing for him, and that he would have the seat of honor. That's just how it worked. And so, some of these illustrations he used, and then some of the parables where, when you go to the dinner, take the low seat. Don't take the high seat. They would not have, the seat of honor is the one you want. And usually you earned it because you put that other side of it, the other side of the transaction at your obligation by doing something for him. So the idea that you would turn it down and go sit in the lower seat is would make no sense to these people. And so it's this suffocating social web of obligation is social caste system. And so this would happen within a caste system, right? You would give alms to people below to be seen by the people in your caste, or maybe the one below or whatever, as doing it. So you always did your almsgiving publicly. You lent or something, or invited to dinner someone in your own class so that they would do the same thing for you. That's just how it worked. And so he's overturning, he's in a total inversion. He's overturning all of that. It all goes away in this new kind of kingdom principle. There is no acting, there is no putting anyone under social obligation of any kind. And his example is God himself, who gives without regard. God doesn't act this way. He doesn't give with the expectation that he will be given to in return, because who can give to God? There's also a play on, there's also some element of it, I think, in the whole the faith versus works argument. You know, for us, we can kind of get our mind around unmerited favor, you know, God being saved through faith alone or something like that. But for these people where merit, you know, the social obligation thing, social achievement was just so front and center, that it just wouldn't make sense on any level. That's how I think of it. Okay. I have a lot more to say about this, except that he summarizes it in verse 36. Be merciful as your heavenly Father is merciful. And he just gave you what it looks like. And what it looks like is don't put anybody under your debt by when you do something for them. That all goes away in the kingdom. That can't have any place, eventually that can't have any place in the church. And if at Corinth, that'll be a problem. You know, these different classes that begin to separate themselves based on social caste. And Paul will have none of it. Paul the Roman, we'll get back to that, will have none of that stuff. A man who is up towards the top of the social caste system, or from birth. So that to me is the most important element of this whole section. And I think it underlies from top to bottom, there's really only one principle. And that's it, you know. That's probably one or two principles. That's one of the most important principles that he's getting in terms of conduct between the people in this newly reshaped people of God. Don't bring the world's values and the world's web of social obligations and so forth into the kingdom of God, which will eventually manifest as the church. And then, of course, there's the principle of we want to reduce it to principles that we understand today. So, you know, love your enemies, do good to those who hate you. So it's this principle of, you know, somebody strikes you on the right cheek, offer them the left also. This idea of non-retaliation. I'm not sure about that. I think it's because that was such a prominent part of the way that they interacted, that he just, you know, within the church, within the kingdom, we don't retaliate. I'm laying it down. We forgive. We are merciful the way our heavenly Father is, and we don't retaliate within the people of God. There's a lot of retaliation in the Old Testament. And if you do all of this, he says in verse 35, there it is, right? It's not that you put God under your obligation, but he will reward you, because he's a rewarder of the ungrateful and the sinful and so forth. But on that principle, but never out of obligation. You never ever in any way can put God under an obligation in any possible sense. Okay, I got a little note about sinners. Interesting word, because you have the social caste system. You know, I've talked about this. The Romans at the top, and there's different kinds of Romans. You know, you have the senatorial class and the equestrian class, these different classes. You know, you have artisans and, you know, tradesmen, military, you know, centurions, which we'll talk about. You have these different classes in the caste system, different castes. You have women, children. Now you have in the spiritual side, you have a social caste system. You have Jew and Gentile. Within Jew, maybe you have Palestinian Jew, Hebrew Jew, Hebraic Jew, and Hellenistic Jew, which becomes a problem for the church. Acts chapter 6. The Hebrews obviously consider themselves in a higher caste, and so they're neglecting the Hellenistic widows. And Peter resolves that problem. You have in the Gentile world, you're going to have pagans, God-fearing Gentiles, and God-fearing proselyte Gentiles.
What does that mean?
Circumcised. And so from bottom to top, pagan, God-fearing, that's Cornelius, Acts chapter 10, proselytes who were in Jerusalem on the day of Pentecost in chapter 2, And then, of course, descendants of Abraham. And the distinction between, isn't it, the line between the descendant of Abraham and everyone, every kind of Gentile is absolute. So it doesn't matter how devout you are, if you're a proselyte Gentile, you can never transcend blood. You can never transcend your genetics. You will never be a Jew. I was just reading this in a commentary that Gentiles were never allowed to call themselves Jews. And so it comes into the kingdom then as a caste system. You have Jewish Christians and Gentile Christians. And by definition, the Gentile Christians then would be at the top. Paul won't have any other, of course, to get to all that. That's not a part of this yet, but I'm just saying, that spiritual caste system. So these sinners are down there. It doesn't matter that the tax collector probably has a lot of money. He's at the bottom because he's a tax collector. He's at the bottom of the spiritual caste system that flows over then into the social caste system. And he becomes ostracized socially in a society that revolves around religious, it's religious forms, like with Matthew. So when Jesus, he's going to happen. Yeah, that already happened. It already happened. When Matthew has the dinner for Jesus, it just overturns every element of the spiritual caste system. Okay, we went to 30. Where did we go to?
36.
Yeah, we should have went 2 more. Do 2 more.
Judge not, and you will not be judged. Condemn not, and you will not be condemned. Forgive, and you will be forgiven. Give, and it will be given to you. Good measure, pressed down, shaken together, running over, will be put into your lap. For from the measure you use, it will be measured back to you.
Now we're talking reciprocity. Now Jesus is saying, God does practice reciprocity. He will be as forgiving as you are. He will be as harsh a judge as you are. So don't judge harshly, and you will not be judged. I bet this must have sounded. So this is rabbi. That's how they would have thought of Jesus. Obviously, if a Pharisee is asking him to dinner in the next chapter, he has some stature among the higher classes. Right? You're not going to see Jesus invited to any chief priest's house because Jesus was a proclaimer of some kind of resurrection, and the chief priestly class was the aristocracy, and they were drawn from the Sadducees, who didn't believe there was a resurrection. So there's absolute distinction between the Pharisees and Sadducees, and therefore the Pharisees and the chief priests. Jesus would have more closely identified with the Pharisees than he would not have identified at all with the chief priests or the Sadducees. So in Acts, the Pharisees are going to be portrayed negatively. In Luke, the Pharisees are portrayed negatively. In Acts, that will flip, and you will see Pharisees portrayed. There will be believing Pharisees because of the common belief in the resurrection. You'll have Paul, who was a Pharisee, who identified with the Pharisaical class all the way into Jerusalem in about chapter 20.
Can you give a brief description of Pharisees, scribes, Sadducees?
Yeah, so there were these sectarian Judaism. There were these. I think there were these subgroups of Jews that were defined by they all had certain beliefs in common. Like, for example, they were all children of Abraham. They all believed in Moses and the law and so forth. But they in the intertestamental period, the sectarianism arose where you'd have subsets of Jews. And so you had the Pharisaical class, Pharisaical school, which believed in resurrection, the resurrection of the dead at the end, at the day of judgment, not now, and an afterlife, and the spiritual world, and all the books that we call the Old Testament as canonical. So they would have been, I think they would have been the ones who would have translated the Septuagint.
Into
Greek. That's the Greek translation of the Hebrew Bible. Because in 250 BC, you got all these Hellenistic Jews all over the empire. They no longer speak Aramaic. So how can they don't have a Bible anymore. So they created the Septuagint so that they could read the Bible in Greek. And I would assume you ain't gonna see, that's, the Sadducees would not have been a part of that. I don't know enough about this, so I probably shouldn't talk about it, because they did not believe in those books. The Sadducees said there was no resurrection, there's no spiritual world, there's no angels, there's no afterlife, and only the first five, only the Torah, the Pentateuch, what we call the Pentateuch, is the first 5 books are canonical. Oh, cool.
Well, so that's interesting because the angels are still mentioned in the Torah. But anyway, and then the
Where?
scribes, well, not the angels, but an angel is mentioned. God put an angel at the entrance of the garden.
Is it called an angel? I don't remember.
I thought so.
That is interesting. I don't know how they handle that. There's the messengers that visit Abraham and then head down to Sodom to destroy it, but they're messengers. You can translate that like, okay.
So anyway, and then the scribes.
Scribes would be doctors of the law. So when he talks about lawyers,
Okay.
woe to you lawyers, he doesn't mean like our lawyers. He probably means these people who were self-appointed guardians of what constituted orthodoxy to the Mosaic law.
Okay.
And they were scribes of the Pharisees. So
And
these, there was this lineage with these guys, and they had their own scribes.
Okay. So what differentiates a scribe from a Pharisee? As far
That's a good question. I don't know.
okay.
Because my guess is a scribe is a Pharisee. I mean, a scribe would be, maybe it's because he attaches himself to a particular Pharisee or a group of Pharisees. I don't know. I'll look into that a little bit. Maybe we may not even know.
Yeah.
It's also possible that they're almost interchangeables. Those 2 words. I don't know though.
Okay. Okay.
What about going back to what you're talking about the last 4 verses? Here's some kind of maybe a 2-parted thing.
Hold on a minute. Aaron, can you hear me? Participants. Still joining. Looks like he fell apart. Maybe he left. Oh, wait. Maybe it doesn't work.
2-part.
So what do you make of this whole idea that God uses the same kind of judgment and mercy that we do? Or like returns?
There's no question. You have a mandate to lend freely. You have a mandate to love your enemies. You also have a mandate to forgive. And it's overriding, and he's not negotiating on it. And so he'll just say, if you do not forgive others, do you really think God is going to forgive you? You think you can not forgive others and God is just going to forgive you? Is that what you think of God's forgiveness? And you think that lightly of it? Aaron, what are you doing? Are you smoking a cigar? Can you hear me? Still connecting to audio. Well,
Oh, it's connected.
give me a thumbs up if you can hear me. Oh, there you are. Got
We
some.
can hear you.
You look like you're sneaking around in somebody's basement.
Are you talking to me?
Yeah,
I can't see you, but you can see me, can't you?
yeah,
Anyways, I just finished robbing a place.
pretty creepy. Because you're walking in and out of the darkness. Anyway, I got to get back to studying, keep teaching here.
I don't know how I'd mute this. Can you mute me somehow?
You can mute yourself and turn your video off. But I think I
Mary
might.
doesn't see you anymore.
Yourself.
That's me. Hold on, so let me mute you. Hold on a minute.
I appreciate that.
There, you're muted.
Stop this video too.
Ah,
There, I stopped your video. All right,
so. Okay,
so that's the point. So God says, I forgive you. The human says, that's great, but I'm not forgiving him.
So it's like the parable of the unforgiving servant.
Yeah,
Where he's forgiven and then he goes out and he
Yeah.
demands his due and then
Does that
gets thrown into jail until he can pay it off.
extend to?
so there's the obligation coming back into play. That whole parable is about the web of obligation.
Yeah.
These guys borrow from each other and you don't just forgive that debt. In fact, you can get to the point where you can have debt servitude, where you become a slave because you can't pay your debts.
Yeah.
Anyway, go ahead.
Does this extend to eternal salvation?
There it is. Right, I mean. Be merciful as your heavenly Father is merciful. What's the extent of that? Do not judge, you will not be judged. What's the corollary? Do not judge and you will not be judged. The corollary is if you judge, you will be judged. The condition for not being judged is not judging. I don't know how else to read that. Because who would even think of that? Who would sit there and toy in their minds? Well, wait a minute. I don't want to be forgiving. How far can I go? What can I get away with and still have God forgive? That kind of calculation, it just has no place in the kingdom of God. Now, I say that as somebody that has demonstrated his sadistic sensibilities about his enemies more than once, but it's all in my head.
But
Yeah.
the disciples try to do that at some point, right? They're how often do I have to forgive my neighbor 7
Yes.
times 7?
They
Or
wouldn't,
whatever.
they would have thought they were being generous.
Right.
Well, how often do I have to forgive them? 7 times? They think they're
mean-
being generous. He says, no, not 7 times, 70 times 7.
Is it too neat to say in answer your, I don't know if this is just me trying to put a bow on it, which we've talked about how that just doesn't really work. But to say, if you have eternal salvation, then you have the Lord working in your life. And that would show.
You will need help with this.
Yeah, but my point being, like, if you are not willing to forgive, or if you,
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know, I know it gets iffy because I have somebody who's been a complete jackass to my family, and I just want to never
Yeah.
forgive him ever. But I also know I'm called to forgive, so I'm wrestling with that. But like,
She's heard me go off on. I kind of tend to do it with people who are straightforward hostile to the gospel. Those are the people that, if somebody cuts me off or even steals from me, I'm not holding that. I don't like it, but that's not the kind of thing that gets me. What gets me is when I see somebody victimize the innocent. So when I see, there's a riot and this poor guy's business got burned down.
Yeah.
It's really hard for me to not just want to see that guy that did it torched. It's just this innate thing in me,
Yeah, well, so the other part of this, or what I was thinking about, is that I've heard this like judge not, lest you be judged quote used in all kinds of ways to suggest that Christians have no business basically using judgment. Honestly, it's kind of what it boils down to.
usually by people who do it vociferously.
Yeah.
And they
yeah,
neutralize, they're
that's
trying to
true.
neutralize,
It's
they're trying to
super true.
neuter their, but you get to do anything you want. Is that the point?
Yeah, and I kind of.
And I think that's so then that becomes the question that, judge not and, you will not be judged. He never explains what he means by the word judge,
Right.
because he uses judge in another sense later about how you're supposed to judge wisely.
Right, yeah,
So he does not mean, obviously, this is not some kind of universal transcendent. That's ridiculous,
right.
But I think it doesn't matter. I think we know what he means here. This is not, he would probably say this is not rocket. You know exactly what I'm talking about. What are you trying to get out of? If you're a stickler, if you got this incredibly high standard of measure that you don't meet, but you're demanding it of other people, why do you judge your enemy who's got the beam in his eye when you have a log in your own eye? Get the log out of your own eye, and then you see clearly the speck out of his eye.
Right.
It's that kind of thing. So yeah, I suppose if you're going to judge, you better have your house in order.
Yeah, let him without sin cast the first stone.
Okay,
Greg just said he's coming, so I'm making some little read stuff.
Okay.
I know.
I put some notes down here. Those who opposed, some of the context of this, those who opposed Jesus calculated the status of the people around them. It was a constant thing. People were more or less valuable to you in terms of what their status was. So you got invited to this guy's house, and you got invited to a chief priest's house. You went to the chief priest's house. The status was higher. So you are calculating the value of people based on their social status and spiritual status. Did anybody see the? Have you seen any of the series? I think it's on Netflix. Huh?
The chosen.
No, Black Mirror. It's a Twilight. It's a Twilight Zone. Have you seen it?
I saw one episode. Black Mirror.
Black Mirror. Yeah.
No.
It's like a Twilight Zone kind of. So each episode is independent, like Twilight Zone. But the season 3, episode 1
Each
it's-
episode or each.
episode. Each episode, you can watch them in any order. And so season 3, episode 1 is an episode about a society that calculates the status
This is the only episode I saw.
of the people around Bryce
Yeah.
Dallas Howard, of the people of everything is the interaction is all about is about a calculation and a benefit. Yeah, social score.
Wait,
Yeah.
how do you get judged, or do you not know until you?
By your phone and.
You can rate each other's the interaction. You can rate somebody. And then as your status goes up, you have access to better neighborhoods and so forth. So you know that everybody in that neighborhood has a 4-star average or something. And you're trying to, yeah, but the result is that you're always calculating the status of everybody and the value of an interaction. It's totally fake. So 2 people get on the other.
That was coming.
Yeah, it's really.
It really is a great, yeah, that's right, with Facebook and so forth, yeah.
That's Facebook.
Did I say the Facebook? I didn't say the Facebook.
You didn't.
I did?
That's okay. I think you were saying with the social medias. and
I was
stuff,
gonna,
and
then I
you-
was, yeah. Not being so judgy.
That's not.
Being judgy, I literally just said.
I was laughing at you.
He wants to. Where were you? Where were you? Oh, okay.
Is your house a mile away?
All right, let's get going here. Okay, so those who oppose Jesus calculated the status of the people around them. It happened all the time, including Jesus. So he knows when he's walking into these houses and he's doing this, he knows that everybody is calculating the value of the interaction with him and his disciples. But the people who did that, they were the ones that formulated the rules, the social status rules. So they always favored them. And it was reinforcing.
Pharisees and the Sadducees were the yeah.
There were
Social enemies.
and spiritual adversaries, but there were Pharisees on the council, so they found a way to make it work. But ever since, it used to be the case, I think at a certain point before the Romans got control of Palestine, the Pharisees were the leading group in the Sanhedrin. And then eventually it turned and the Sadducees became the aristocratic class.
The next section talks about the spectrum of other side.
Okay. Yeah, I should probably read my own notes before I say stuff like that. So Jesus calls into being a new people with a countercultural existence that sounds all 60s, whose lives are based on an inverted understanding of the prevailing social order. I got that from someone because I got quotations around some of it. Ironically, Jesus' new world will also be based on reciprocity. Those who act without expectation of return will be rewarded. Reward is given to those who expect none. And this author, whoever I got this from, I think it was Joel Green. Their world was an intrusive, suffocating web of obligation. And you see that actually in Acts, probably. Luke and Acts were written by a Gentile, probably of a little higher social order, possibly a Roman, who may be writing back to his patron who's funding this project out of obligation, Theophilus. May be the patron for the project. We may have Theophilus, this somewhat kind of anonymous person out there. We may have him to thank for having Luke and Acts. He may have funded it. And this is Luke's obligation. He's now fulfilling his obligation. So that's all I got for that. This introduces, all of this is going to be an issue now for the rest of this chapter and the next one. Okay, 39 through 43, 45.
And he spoke a parable to them. Can the blind lead the blind? Will they not both fall into the ditch? The disciple is not above his teacher, but everyone who is perfectly trained will be like his teacher. And why do you look at the speck in your brother's eye, but do not perceive the plank in your own eye? Or how do you say to your brother, brother, let me remove the speck that is in your eye, when you yourself do not see the plank that is in your own eye? Hypocrite. First remove the plank from your own eye, then you will see clearly to remove the speck that is in your brother's eye. For a good tree does not bear bad fruit, nor does a bad tree bear good fruit. Through 40 what?
5.
For every tree is known by its own fruit. For men do not gather figs from thorns, nor do they gather grapes from a bramble bush. A good man out of the good treasure of his heart brings forth good, and an evil man out of the evil treasure of his heart brings forth evil. For out of the abundance of the heart, mouth speaks.
Do you know who, I'm just thinking of this right now. You know, anybody heard the name Friedrich Nietzsche?
Yeah.
So he's one that is famous for saying God is dead, and
German.
yeah, German. He's considered one of the 5 greatest writers, German writers of all time. What's the that which doesn't kill you makes you stronger, which is always taken out of context. But anyway, he had this principle. He kind of sternly lectured the Christians. He said, you Christians are always mistaking cause for effect. You think that lying makes you a liar. That's false. You lie because you're a liar.
Yeah.
Liars lie.
Yeah.
Honest people tell the truth. You didn't become a liar when you lied. You lied because you already were a liar. And that, it seems to me, is a pretty good summation of what he's talking about here. From a man who didn't believe God existed at all. But he was watching the Christians and noticing their characteristics. And you ask forgiveness for lying, and now it becomes, God, make me not a liar. Obviously I'm still a liar because I just lied. It's in there. So there, there's the fruit. We don't like that fruit thing because we're kind of looking for some kind of middle ground that I can exist in. Can't I just be this good? It's not, it's like we're looking for it to not be, what coming somehow to come just find some place short of where he calls us to be. Everybody does it, I think. At some level inside, everybody has that in them, and that's all corruption. But the pursuit of sanctification, it's to the extent that there's bad fruit, the tree is bad. He's doing it in a very binary way here. But of course, we're not there. As John says, everybody, you say that you have no sin, you deceive yourself, and there's the sin again, you're deceiving yourself. But at any rate, he's getting at the essence of hypocrisy here. I wrote down, those who reprove others ought not suffer from the same shortcoming. What I try to do unsuccessfully a lot is when I see somebody do something, I try to think, or I should think, man, do I do that? That internal monologue, that self-reflection. Not that you beat yourself up, you're just looking to learn from somebody else's being, and this person is like that. And once you're aware of it in yourself, it makes you a little more merciful to other people, I think. So then what is a hypocrite? It's one who reproves a fault in another while suffering from the same fault himself. Now, the Pharisees, he's gonna attack the Pharisees because they make a show of their long prayers in the marketplace and their fasting. They always do that stuff publicly. So he's got that kind of hypocrisy as well. It's just a fraud. Everything is a pretense. Everything is a fraud. Everything is a pose. POSE. And I think he's gonna summarize, he summarizes all of that as hypocrisy, which it's just lack of genuineness, lack of sincerity, which is really the root of the idea of hypocrisy here. Lack of sincerity. Boy, you meet these people that are just really sincere. And they're just, you don't want to sin in front of them. I had these friends in when I lived in Virginia. You begin to fake who you are because they're just so genuinely good. And you're trying to measure up or something like that. And it's almost like relief when you leave because now you can go back to being who you are. And hopefully they become role models for you. But I just remember this one guy, his name was Dave. And I remember thinking, this guy has never said anything bad about somebody else. Even if the guy deserved it. He had this thing. He just wouldn't do it. He had eradicated gossip from his life completely. It's an amazing thing to watch. I think it requires I've said many times that the chief virtue of not just Christian life, but life in general is humility. You can't be a good leader. You can't hardly be a good anything without it involves any other people. Or no, actually, period, without having a sense of humility, because you have to be willing to come to grips with your own faults and inadequacies and weaknesses. And the only way that you can do that is you have to stare them in the face and go, yep, there it is. And I got to do something about that. And I've known people, I'm like that. I'm like that to some extent. Everybody is. I was much more like it 25, 30 years ago. Couldn't face the fact that I might be the one in the wrong. And so you always got to play the victim. You're never the one. If the other person is responsible for the wrong, then you're never wrong. And you never have to face your own inadequacies. But I think it's important that happened, and it takes the Holy Spirit to do it. And sometimes it takes a lifetime. And some of that's out of context or beyond the context of this. And I got a quote here from probably Green: the unavoidable relation between human being and human doing. Sounds a little transcendental, but that's all for that section. New kingdom principles. This is how we conduct ourselves among the new people of God. This new thing that I brought with me, and now a new people of God is going to take shape. And this is what it has to look like within the new people of God. And it cannot, you have to leave the world's value set, and particularly the web of social obligation and so forth, and caste system. You have to leave all that behind and undo not only a lifetime of learning, but in the Jewish context with spiritual caste system, 1400 years of learning. That's the circumcised Jew is at the top, with his submission to Moses, and then everybody else is below that. Leave all that behind. Anybody got anything you want to say about it? To finish this chapter off and move on to the centurion. 46, the rest of it, 46 through whatever it is. 49.
Why do you call me Lord, Lord, and not do what I tell you? Everyone who comes to me and hears my words and does them, I will show you what he is like. He is like a man building a house who dug deep and laid a foundation on the rock. And when the flood arose, the stream broke against that house, and it could not shake it, because it had been well built. But the one who hears and does not do them is like a man who builds a house on the ground without foundation. When the stream broke against it, immediately it fell, and the ruin of that house was great.
Yeah, Lord, he does this twice, I think. There's another place where it's almost like a pet peeve of his. When somebody calls him Lord, and which they would. Right, you would address somebody, Rabbi, you would address them and acknowledge their status. And then not do what they say. It's like a pet peeve of his. Not everyone who says to me, another place is going to say, not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven, but he who does the will of my Father. These statements like this. That purity of intent, the sincerity of intent, especially considering that the people around him, you could see right through them. There's so much fake, there's so much falsity, so much pretense in social interaction. It was just how things worked. It is for us too. But he's looking at that, and he's got these people, like the Pharisee in the next story, is going to invite Jesus to his house, and he's going to invite other honored guests. So he can be seen to honoring Jesus, and then also probably put Jesus in his debt. And then everybody can feel like, it's the Black Mirror episode all over again. And these people can all say they were at this dinner, and that sort of thing. He's gonna express his sort of contempt for it in the story a little bit. The woman's gonna come in and just invade the whole thing and defile the whole thing. It's just this explosion of uncleanness into this supposed pristine, table fellowship setting in the next story. But so it's almost like they're going to be examples of exactly what he's talking about. Because I think Simon is going to call him master in the next one. I don't know if he does or not. Does he call him master in the next one? It doesn't matter. So that's all. Teacher, yeah. I have to go back and look and see if it's the word for rabbi. People are like trees in that they reveal what they are through what they produce. How do you argue with that? Calls for total transformation with consistency of goodness between the inside and the outside of a person. And remember how he's going to criticize the Pharisees. Outside you are, what does he call it? Outside you are something, but inside you are full of dead men's bones or something like that. But the discord between what's outside and what's inside. So people are coming to Jesus eager. It's almost like he's trying to drive them away. They're coming to Jesus eager to hear what he says, but will they do what he says? And most of them are going to walk away. Because he knows his own destiny. He knows what's going to happen. Almost all of them are going to walk away. So he's continuing his mission of sifting. And almost by definition, sowing division. It's a summons to a hard life. It's the rich young ruler thing. Go and sell all that you have and then come follow me. He just walks away. So he's not interested in the numbers, obviously. That's chapter 6. So let's move on to the next story. Before we do that, I have a few precursor notes. So Sabbath keeping. Oh, wait a minute, I'm sorry. I'm in the wrong place. I did my notes different this time. All right, the centurion. So let's just go ahead and read it 1 through. Story in. Wow, we got a lot of notes on this.
Okay.
Let's just do the whole story, yeah.
Through 10 or 1 through?
The 10?
1 through 10 is the
Yes.
centurion, and 11 starts with
1 through 10.
When he had completed all his discourse in hearing of the people, he went to Capernaum. And a centurion's slave, who was highly regarded by him, was sick and about to die. When he heard about Jesus, he sent some Jewish elders asking him to come and save the life of his slave. When they came to Jesus, they earnestly implored him, saying, "He is worthy for you to grant this to him. He loves our nation, and it was he who built us our synagogue." Now Jesus started
on his way with them. And when he was not far from the house, the centurion sent friends saying to him, Lord, do not trouble yourself further, for I am not worthy for you to come under my roof. For this reason, I did not even consider myself worthy to come to you. Just say the word, and my servant will be healed. For I also am a man placed under authority with soldiers under me. And I say to this one, go, and he goes. To another, come, and he comes. To my slave, do this, and he does it. Now when Jesus heard this, he marveled at him, and turned and said to the crowd that stopped following him, I say to you, not even in Israel have I found such great faith. When those who had been sent returned to the house, they found the slave with help.
Okay, so here comes a Gentile, probably a God-fearing Gentile, but he cannot transcend that spiritual, the spiritual caste system. He's a Gentile and he can never be a Jew. And so he knows the sensibilities of these people. He has, in a sense, put the Jews under his obligation because why are they here? They're here because it's the opportunity to repay him for the fact that he built their synagogue for them. And so it's the Jews that show up. It's an ironic thing, right? Right away, Jews are showing up, imploring Jesus. Why would they be so interested? Are they just nice guys about this Gentile? Why would they care about this Gentile? Answer, we are obligated to him and we have our chance to rectify the situation. And so they implore Jesus to come and heal this guy's slave. So that's number one about the social caste system kind of being, expressed here. Number two, there's an inversion because the slave of the centurion is a slave, but he's called highly regarded. In fact, he's so highly regarded that he would be the saving of the slave would be considered payment by the Jews for the debt incurred by this Gentile building the synagogue. Maybe something like that is going on. It doesn't mean that it's anything treacherous or malicious or nefarious on the part of the centurion. That's just how things work. You paid your debts, and very little was free. So if you could repay, he may not have been he would probably have considered it. He knew about what he had done, and he would probably have considered it a social slight if they'd have had the opportunity. I mean, they're Jews. He knows they don't necessarily have it, but if they had the opportunity and they didn't take it to do something for him, he would feel that slight. So they don't pass up the opportunity, and they head off to Jesus. That's how I read it. Yeah, between the lines, an awful lot going on between the lines in these kinds of stories. And I'd be wrong about that. Yeah, of course. But just don't imagine that they do things for the reasons that we do. He's such a nice guy. Can you do something for this really nice guy? No, look at what they say. He's worthy. He built our synagogue for us. So they're communicating to Jesus that we have an obligation here to help this centurion. Jesus knows that, so he gets up and he goes to help this centurion, even though he's not. They're pulling him into their obligation, even though he's not obligated at all. And the centurion, of course, there it is. If he goes and heals the slave, does the centurion become? Does that basically constitute an obligation on the part of the centurion towards Jesus? After the example of how you're supposed to lend freely, you have this example where Jesus is going to go freely heal this slave and ask for nothing in return, and then the centurion just disappears from the story, never paying back Jesus for the good that he did.
He never even sees Jesus.
He never even sees him, and he shows this remarkable insight. So this deference that this centurion shows to a nothing Jew. Centurions are high status. Roman, probably, right there. Categorical distinction between a Roman and a Jewish carpenter like this. Centurion, high status, military, but he defers to Jesus. And after the Jews say he is worthy for you to do this, what's the words they use there? He is worthy for you to grant this to him. Then in the story, when Jesus shows up, what do the messengers from the centurion say? I am not worthy.
Mhm.
He negates what the Jews said. There's no, the social obligation thing goes away with when Jesus arrives. I can't do anything to repay you. If you do this, I can't do anything to, you're just gonna have to do this as a matter of just a gracious gift for me, because there's nothing I can do to repay you. And Jesus, of course I'll do that. He heals him. He heals him with a word. He doesn't even, there's no words, right? He's just simply, isn't he just better?
Yeah, when they go back. it's better.
He's just better.
Yeah, he
Yeah.
tells him not to come.
And it's over, yeah. So I just think that if that's the way things are going, it's a remarkably what's the word? Sophisticated, not complicated. It's much more nuanced than, you know, than we might in our culture, where we don't have the same sense of social status and social obligation. I don't ever want somebody to think they're obligated to, you know, you give a gift at Christmas. You don't want the person turning around, going to the store, getting a gift and giving it back to you. That negates the gift. You know, in their world, it's not like that. If I invite you for a dinner, it's because I perceive you to have some social status and I expect you to return the favor at some point. So if I find out that you did have a dinner and you didn't invite me, that's a serious slight, social slight. That's the Greco-Roman world. All right. Let's see. So he subverts the master-slave relationship. I am not worthy, but the slave is highly regarded. I am not worthy, but the slave is worthy to be healed, you know, more or less says the centurion. Speaking of centurions, I would, just before I came over here, I was remembering something. Centurions are a big deal in Luke and Acts. They repeatedly appear in the narrative, and I counted 8 of them. And in every single case, they are portrayed in a positive fashion. So I don't know what that means, but Luke has a thing about centurions. They come into the narrative and they do something good, even if they don't mean to. That last one there is, we get his name, Julius, the one that keeps the ship's personnel from killing Paul along with the other prisoners. I don't remember the story when they're going to be shipwrecked on the island of Malta. The soldiers want to kill all the prisoners so they don't get away. Julius, but the centurion, wishing to save Paul's life, you know, doesn't let that happen. And so Paul is able to make it to, it's almost like he's put under the protection of a centurion by God, and the centurion knows it, to see him get safely to Rome. A very, very positive portrayal. And then he disappears. But you know, centurion's gonna prevent Paul from getting beaten to death. Centurion's gonna escort him to Caesarea so the Jews can't kill him later in the plot. There's the centurion at the cross is the one who states, truly this man was innocent, right out of Isaiah chapter 53, you know, the suffering servant passage, which illuminates the crucifixion scene. But it's a Gentile centurion who says that. Why does he say it? We aren't told. But anyway, so there's all the centurions.
Centurion was in charge of
100.
100 soldiers.
Yeah, they were high status. They had a lot more money than your average legionnaire. We don't know anything about this guy except that he's probably that's a good question, because how did he, well, it doesn't matter, I guess. Was he in Caesarea? Where the garrison is, where the Roman garrison is, which would be on the ocean, you know, in Samaria, but doesn't appear that that's where his house is. So where is he that you have a centurion out and amongst somewhere? I don't know how that worked, but you know, doesn't really matter. Let's see. So the Jews asked Jesus basically to participate in their system of patronage, social obligation, and help them pay off their patron.
I think it's interesting that like you said, the Jewish elders go and say he's worthy, and then it's his friends who he sends to say that he's not worthy.
Exactly.
And you would assume that your friends would be like, nah, he actually, like there's like a little,
On
But
the
they
other
don't.
hand,
They
on the
just-
other hand, you give the message that you're told to give.
yeah, that's true. Yeah, they give the message, and then it doesn't say that Jesus just says, not even in Israel have I found such faith.
Yeah.
And
so
they
that-
walk away, there's no like, the servant is healed, go home, he's better, like, there's nothing about that, he
Right,
doesn't
that's-
say the word.
It does matter that he's healed,
Right, but he doesn't
Um,
like, yeah. it's just-
but the denigration of his own people, is denigrating his own people before this Gentile. The Gentile is the one who's portrayed in a positive fashion in comparison to his own people. So it's denigrating to the Jews in general.
This always so interesting to me though, that he marveled at him, because it's like, I'm like, well, Jesus knows everything about all of us. And he knew that the centurion would do this, and yet he still like,
And what did Jesus know? Was he all, we're back to the question of whether he was omniscient when he was walking around on the earth.
yeah, I guess, I don't know, but that's just like said.
But God is not,
like,
God is all those things. He is surprised. As God, I mean, he was shocked at man's evil in Genesis chapter 6.
Yeah.
He's grieved about this, and Jesus is going to be the same way. Jerusalem, Jerusalem, how I long to, take you under my, however he says that, he quotes the passage, I forget which passage it is, but yeah, that's, very, we're emotional, in the image of God, he's emotional, and he's amazed. Yeah. Even if he knew, he can still be amazed. Doesn't happen very often. It's a Gentile, probably God-fearing Gentile. And he has this remarkable insight. No rich, remember, the pagans had very, very, very ritualistic. It was the performing of the ritual itself that appeased the gods. It didn't matter whether you had faith in the gods or anything else. The only thing that mattered was that you actually performed the ritual. It's very mechanical. So you have to do this thing, which Jesus almost never does. He's going to touch the coffin in the next story, and the man's going to rise up. But there's no ritual. And so this guy, precisely the sort of guy that you might expect to think there needs to be a ritual, understands supremely this essential insight into the power of the real God, which is his powerful word. That's it. All he needs is the word, no rituals. And I think that's what, in comparison to the pagan world, that's probably what Jesus would have been amazed at. And it's favorable in comparison to his own people who don't seem to understand that simple insight. Okay, so 2 Kings chapter 5, you have Elijah, then Elisha healed a Gentile soldier of leprosy with no fanfare. It's called a cleansing. So there's going to be these eerie parallels with prophets from the past. There's going to be Elijah in the next story with raising the woman's son. Very, very parallel to the story of Elijah's raising of the woman's son as well, which I read just before I got here. I hadn't read it for a long time. But you pick up on these things where this prophet Jesus is. Yeah, John the Baptist was Elijah, but man, there's an awful lot of Elijah in Jesus too, and then Elisha. A little bit of Moses.
wait, is it Elijah or Elisha? who
This
heals
one is
Naaman?
Elisha. What's that?
Elisha heals Naaman, the leper. And then
Yes.
Elijah raises his son.
Yes. But it's a Gentile.
Right.
It's a Gentile soldier that Elisha heals. Who it's a weird story, but now you have this Gentile soldier who Jesus heals.
It's kind of interesting because in the chapter with Elisha, Naaman is going to reject what Elisha.
Yeah,
tells him
yeah,
to
and it's
do
just a
and
weird
everything.
story.
And then it's just interesting because it's like, it's the centurion who's believing for the servant. Whereas like in the Elisha story, it's almost the other way around.
Yeah,
Where the servant's
Yeah.
believing for Naaman. Naaman does the work of dipping in the Jordan, but
that's it.
that's it. Yeah.
Just take your healing, man.
Yeah.
So Jesus subverts the entire system of patronage by healing without any payment or obligation on the part of the centurion. Everybody would have been stunned. Even the Jews probably were expecting that they were going to need to return the favor somehow back to Jesus. And it just disappears from the narrative. Give freely without expecting anything in return. And then he goes and does it. Heals this guy's servant, and then he's going to raise the dead kid. All right, let's go ahead and shut down. Here he says to nobody out there.